Chapter 21, Contact. Sue wanted to discuss what they had witnessed. Those soldiers with the strange flag murdering those survivors without warning. How had they known survivors occupied that building? Where had they come from? What country sent them? Too many questions swirled through her head with no answers. Once they reached the bunker, Ulysses reached for another bottle of whiskey. After guzzling a few drinks, he stomped around in circles, mumbling to himself. He seemed as lost as Sue felt. With nothing else to do, Sue sat in front of the monitors in the control room, her eyes glued to the various camera feeds with nothing new coming into view. What had she expected to see? Sue tried the shortwave radio after finding nothing new on the cameras. No matter how she turned the knobs on the radio, only static came through the speaker. Fear of who might be listening kept her from transmitting anything. This pattern continued for 3 days. Sue had almost given up on Ulysses since he locked himself away, drinking into oblivion. But on the 4th day, he shattered the bottle he had clung to, staggering to her side. "We're screwed. Those men who took Lucas know we're here. It's a matter of time before they come back, or those other soldiers find us," Ulysses said. Her stomach churned, hearing his defeatist attitude. Rather than call him on it, she asked him one of her unanswered questions. "Where are those soldiers from?" "Good question. Never saw a flag like that before. Based upon their actions, I guess they're unfriendly." "How did they find those people? They stopped right in front of that building, passing by many others." "My guess, it's only a guess, would be a drone with thermal sensors. Only reason they haven't found us is because the bunker masks our thermal signatures." Sue prayed a silent prayer of thanksgiving for the bunker. It had transitioned from oasis to prison and back to sanctuary within the few weeks they lived here. She wondered how much longer they'd remain safe, but feared putting words to her concern. Speaking the words might make them a reality. A stupid superstition. Ulysses filled in the hole in the conversation. "If they're searching for other people to exterminate, then we won't be safe for long. We need help, Sue." The fear reflected in his eyes made her want to cry. A muscular giant who she thought feared nothing or no one. But his eyes betrayed a different truth. 2 of them, with a handful of guns, weren't a match for an invading army. Ulysses turned his attention to the shortwave radio during the lull in their conversation. Sue thought about telling him she couldn't get it working, but didn't want to crush his spirit any more than it already was. He had walked away from the whiskey, and she didn't want him returning to the bottle. Loneliness worsened her mood. Ulysses turned the dial, pushing several buttons on the radio's control panel. His forehead wrinkled as he stared at the shortwave unit. With a huge paw, he tapped the side, getting the same results Sue had. Nothing. The display lit up, but no voices came through the speaker. Only static. White noise. She wondered if the EMP had destroyed the radio, or if nobody had another working radio to respond with. He frowned as he spoke. "Nothing but static. You'd think there'd be someone out there." She shrugged her shoulders in response, not knowing what to say. Did she want to reach others or not? Everyone she had met had turned on her after some time passed. Ulysses had proved the only exception to this rule. So far. "Do you know what you're doing?" Ulysses had opened the top of the radio, poking around inside the unit with his sausage fingers. She supposed he couldn't break it any worse since it appeared to not function. This time he shrugged his shoulders in response to her question. If it gave him something to focus on besides the booze, then she'd let him putter. He prodded the internal parts of the shortwave radio. Ulysses struggled, muttering some curses. With a firm push, he shoved the chassis back into the rack. After 30 seconds, the lights glowed. It responded to his repairs with pops and static coming through the tinny speaker. No change from before he opened the case. Ulysses worked the controls, pushing the buttons, getting no voices in response. Only more white noise came through the speakers. "I remember seeing some spare parts in the storage room. Let me see what I can find," Ulysses said. As he walked through the doorway, Sue wondered if the bottle had called his name again. She wouldn't blame him if he needed another drink, because she could use one herself. Numb the pain. Forget their problems. Filled with nervous energy, Sue paced around the confines of the control room. She longed for her old life, or at least something close to it. Hiding in this bunker while the world died had lost its appeal. Someone must be capable of fixing the world. The thought of finding other survivors gave her hope, but turned her stomach at the same time. People were shit when given over to their sins. Would she let a stranger into the bunker if they needed help? The answer to the hypothetical question eluded her. Either that, or she didn't want to face how selfish trying to survive had made her. She caught movement out of the corner of her eye from one of the camera feeds. Sue froze mid-step, turning to stare at the monitor. An amorphous shadow passed through the point of view of an outside camera. Sue slumped into the chair, manipulating the camera feeds. The vision could have been her imagination, but the paranoid part of her brain doubted it. Something had moved out there. Sweat poured down her face in the cool room. She punched the buttons, switching the scenes on the monitor like a couch potato looking for something to watch. All these channels with nothing to watch. The thought caused her to groan in frustration. "Sue, what's the matter?" Sue jumped at the sound of Ulysses' deep voice. Her heart raced. Scenes from outside the bunker's door played on the monitors. "I thought I saw something." "What?" His voice broke with the question. Her stomach churned, hearing the quiver in the big man's voice. Before the red rain had fallen, Ulysses showed no fear, even when outnumbered by armed men. She shrugged her shoulders, doubting her eyes and questioning her sanity. Ulysses set a big cardboard box filled with various electronic parts on the table across from her. None of them looked familiar to her. "What's that stuff?" "Radio parts. I'm hoping to get this thing working." "Where'd you learn how to repair shortwave radios?" "I've read a lot. Knowledge is power." A smile bent his lips, lighting up his eyes as he tore into the chassis. She watched him pull a bunch of glass tubes out of the radio, replacing them with parts from the box. Once he finished, he pushed the bulky chassis back into the rack. "Here goes nothing." His grin looked forced as he flipped the power switch. Static crackled through the speaker like before. The edges of his lips turned up as he adjusted the controls. He stopped spinning the dial as a faint voice broke through the noise. "The United States has surrendered to the New World Order. All survivors need to present themselves to the local peacekeeping troops in the nearest city. They will give you your new role as a citizen of the New World Order. Do not resist. The local peacekeeping troops will deal with rebellion swiftly and without mercy." 4 tones similar to the old emergency broadcast system played before the message repeated. The voice sounded robotic, lacking any emotion. "What the hell is the New World Order?" Ulysses changed the frequency of the radio receiver. As he scanned the channels, each played the same message on repeat. His shoulders slumped the longer he tried. "Hello? Hello? Can anyone hear me?" "Wait, Ulysses, stop! Who's that?" "It might be a trick." "And it could be someone who can help." Sue grabbed the microphone, pressing the transmit button before Ulysses could stop her. "I can hear you! Who is this?" Ulysses glared at her as the silence dragged on. Sue thought she had imagined the voice the longer it took to respond. Maybe Ulysses hadn't fixed the radio after all. Another wasted effort. "This is Major Rudolph Johnson from the U.S. Army. Why are you on this channel, ma'am?" The voice went from a confused question to a command within seconds. An alarm went off in Sue's head, and she regretted grabbing the mic. She wanted to plead with Ulysses for help, fearing his response. His eyes had said, "Don't do it," moments ago, but she had transmitted anyways. As usual, Ulysses was right. "Ma'am, are you there? We're ready to send soldiers to rescue you. They can escort you to the safe zone. How many people are with you, and what resources do you have?" Her heart raced, wondering if the major told the truth. A safe zone protected by the U.S. military? She exchanged a look with Ulysses. He stood firm, shaking his head. Logic agreed with his silent assessment of doom, even if another part of her hoped for a better life. Ulysses snatched the microphone after a moment of radio silence. She thought he might rip the cord out of the receiver, but he pressed the button and spoke. "Rudolph, this is Ulysses. What game are you playing?" "Captain, is that you? Come in, now. We could use your talents." "That's not me anymore. I'm just trying to survive." "Has this happened everywhere?" "This channel isn't secure, Captain. Stay put, and we'll be there at sunup. We can talk then." "Negative, Major. Do not come." The veins bulged on the sides of his neck as he spoke. Ulysses' emotions had run wild since the men claiming to represent the government took Lucas. Fear surged through her, seeing him act like this. "Say again! Do not come, Major!" They stared at the radio, waiting for a response from the Major. Time passed, and the man remained mute. "Shit, Sue, we've gotta run."